On the 13th of February 2023, a YouTuber by the name of Sawtooth Waves with over 500,000 subscribers suddenly purged their channel. The banner and profile was blacked out, and almost 10 years of videos appeared to have been wiped from the channel. Why? Sawtooth Waves, previously known as the Brony Notion, was a non-binary YouTuber who made their career off of videos based around the show My Little Pony, evolving from analysis of episodes and MLP lore to producing music. Coming into prominence around 2015 to 2016, the closest way I can describe their analysis is a variation between serious theories about the show in a sort of Digibro style, and then there's meme posts like finding Illuminati symbolism in MLP. Both of these types of videos had made them an idol of sorts in the MLP community for young viewers, because if you know anything about My Little Pony, you know its intended audience is young girls. Strong emphasis on intended though, but let's get back to the present. Sawtooth Waves had now vanished forever with a pensive apology after a girl came out about her experiences with them. So what really were the details of those interactions, and how does the personal statement of Sawtooth Waves compare? Let's investigate what happened. On the 10th of February, an account on Instagram by the name of Beware Sawtooth Waves posted for the first time, beginning to document their side of a relationship they had with Sawtooth. Everything onwards has been confirmed by Sawtooth, and for the remainder of this video, we'll be referring to this girl as Jane. Jane's story begins in the middle of 2014, when she first discovered Sawtooth, still under the name of Brony Notion. At the time, she was 12, and a huge fan of their content, as she started emulating their theory videos, made a whole YouTube channel dedicated to them, and began to idolize them. This is expected. You can't really stop a young fan from idolizing someone they look up to, because they're still pretty inexperienced in life at that point. They need someone to look up to, someone to guide them. There's probably people watching right now who idolize me as a creator, even though that's not my intention at all, because it's realistically bound to happen with any creator who makes content. Jane was a long-term fan of Sawtooth for a while, but the next notable event occurred 3 years later, in March 2017. A 14-year-old Jane makes a bunch of fan art for Sawtooth, and even asks a friend of Sawtooth to let them know she made some fan art, as well as also messaging them directly. Eventually, one of her art pieces was noted by Sawtooth, who decided to drop a like and comment, even asking if they could post the fan art to their social media account. A week later, Sawtooth messages Jane back, and Jane realizes that it's Sawtooth's 19th birthday, so she makes some birthday fan art for them. The two start having some sporadic conversations, such as discussing MLP theories and Sawtooth's channel. However, at this point, these conversations are only really spread out over a few months. I was just so happy that my idol and favourite YouTuber was even talking to me, so that made me want it more and more, since I wasn't getting attention at home. As the months went by, we became friends, and then eventually good friends, and this is where the story really starts. In June 2017, Sawtooth released a song called A New Pair of Wings. Though the YouTube stats of this song are now lost, it did get around 50,000 plays on SoundCloud. According to Jane, this was really when things started moving. Previous to A New Pair of Wings being released, they hadn't really talked too much, but throughout the summer, deeper topics started coming up in their conversations that regarded their personal lives. This included everything from pets to families to personal problems, although Jane says she was the main one venting. At the time, she lived in an abusive household and wasn't getting enough attention at home, and due to that, she started to grow closer to Sawtooth. The both of them began talking non-stop every day and became closer friends. 2 months later, on the 2nd of August 2017, the inevitable happens, as Jane tells Sawtooth that she had a crush on them. Sawtooth promptly replies by saying that they don't reciprocate these same feelings, and things after that were a little awkward. You made that very obvious, and I'm beyond flattered, but I cannot say the feeling is mutual. I think you're a great person, and I really value our friendship, but I feel like I don't know you well for that relationship to exist. Please don't take this seriously. I feel like a good reason not to date someone who's 15 isn't because you don't know them well, it's because they're 15 and you're 19, hello? Regardless of whatever reasoning, rejecting a 15-year-old was a good decision. Don't date kids is a pretty easy thing to comply with. However, as August went on, the DMs really started to get more personal, especially when it came to mailing each other stuff. Here is a picture of Sawtooth's first ever video script, which they actually sent to Jane via mail, although this was lost in a house fire later. Screw the channel. If that died tomorrow, we'd still be friends. Listening to Madian and talking to you, this is exactly what I needed. Jane is a beautiful and talented girl. She's excellent at art and gets better at it every day. Jane is my friend, and she can always come to me with her problems. She matters so much to me, and I love to make her smile. She makes me smile too, always treating me very kindly. Too kindly at times, haha. I'm very thankful to have her in my life. Oh, thank you so much, Jane. You know, you make my day too. I love talking to you, the pleasure is mine. And you know what? I don't feel awkward at all. Becoming friends with you is the best thing to happen to me this year. Imagine being nearly 20 and the best thing happening to you that year is becoming close friends with the 15-year-olds. Yeah, they've got the feelings, it's over. Sawtooth even made special remixes of their songs for Jane, as well as a music video, putting them on a DVD and sending it over to Jane in August. Again, the physical copy of it actually still exists, but just barely. I'm mixing up a special remix for you. You didn't have to. Oh no, you'll like it. Remember how my remix of The Pony I Wanna Be sounds like Not Today by 21p? It seemed as if Sawtooth was really getting to know Jane a lot more, and things started to get more suspicious, as Sawtooth also encouraged Jane to draw ship art of their characters in pony form and send it in the mail. Saw then took pictures of it with his face blurred for privacy reasons. Honestly, I don't have any real friends down here, just people I kinda know and talk to every now and then. You know how I call you my best friend? I'm not just patronizing, you are truly my closest friend. I'm honored to mean so much to you. Just know that you mean so much to me. In September 2017, the inevitable happened again. Sawtooth admits that they like Jane back and the two started a romantic relationship. Jane at this point was 15 and Sawtooth was 19. You're such a good friend. I've never liked someone so much before. There is nothing bad I have to say about you, never had any reason. Don't tell anyone this, okay? But I think you're attractive too. We aren't a couple though, we just act like it. XD, I know. Do you want people to think we're official? Lamau, I don't know, but I never blackmailed you. Yet. Oh, can I say something a little awkward but completely honest real quick? Sure. To be honest, I'd definitely be interested in a relationship with you when we're older. You're so cute, X3. But for now and until then, I'm just happy to be best friends with you. Okay, yes, I feel a little strange. You put me in an odd situation, but I stand by everything I said. We can't be together for a while, but our friendship was strong before I even considered you romantically. That only started a week ago, after you told me you weren't Potato. Still a very happy moment in my life. On my side, this only changes how flirty I will be in the future, but our friendship wasn't built on flirting. What we have is so much more. Who else can we bring our troubles to beyond? Until I go on your channel and advertise myself. Ah, screw it, put the heart there. Oh yes, making it big. And it was mailed to them as well. You want it coloured? I was going to keep it non-coloured, but if you insist. Oh, I thought you were going to. Never mind, I just love it so much. I commission it and pay money for you to send it, because it's the most adorable thing I've ever seen, and I want to see it in person because it's so goddamn cute. You don't think you're cute? Like, girl, you're beautiful as hell. In October and November 2018, the DMs between the two really started amping up, first getting more romantic, and by December they were starting to roleplay kissing. However, this never became anything more than that or developed into explicitly sexual conversations because the two were aware that that was illegal. In fact, Sawtooth expressed that they wanted to wait until Jane was 18 to start having sexual conversations. In December, Jane's mother found the messages between her and Sawtooth and was incredibly angry, threatening to get the police involved on Sawtooth and forcing Jane to cut her off as soon as possible. However, the two were still somehow able to send letters to each other. Jane describes them as love letters, saying it was very Romeo and Juliet. Of course, Romeo and Juliet also describes his relationship pretty accurately, since Romeo is in his early 20s and Juliet is 13, but we'll look past that. Jane recollects that their first parting enforced by her mother really hit her hard mentally, showing how attached she had become to Sawtooth. The first initial separation was really hard on me. I was super attached to Sawtooth and couldn't seem to be really happy without them. This is what we call trauma bonding and having a favourite person. I have BPD as well. I was also being physically abused by my mom. Verbally and emotionally as well, I wasn't allowed to do anything other than school and homework. But since I was unhappy, I didn't really focus on school, which was the start of my downfall during my high school career. I was in my freshman year of high school. I didn't do much but sit around and waste time. It was only during late June of 2018 when Jane got her phone back and managed to get back into contact with Sawtooth, although only briefly as her phone and mobile data were taken away, meaning she had to use a friend's phone to tell them she was okay. They finally got back into full contact in autumn 2018 and continued the same usual romantic kissing roleplay and ship art. September 15th is a particularly notable date during this time, as it includes a document where Sawtooth, now 21, confesses his feelings in extreme detail about Jane, who is 16 by this point. I thought a lot about that decision and whether it's a good one. From my perspective, people have broken your trust far too many times. Correct me if I'm wrong about any of this, but my loyalty to you is one of your biggest comforts in your troubled life. Of course you're anxious and terrified that something so important might be a lie, so you do these checks to make sure I'm not going to betray you like other people have. That breaks my heart, and I want you to feel that security so badly. I wanted to just send enough screenshots to ease your fears and be done with it, but that wouldn't have been real security. It would have faded away, leaving you just as worried next time you saw a notification. Plus, that security would have come at the cost of my privacy and comfort. We both lose in that situation. That's why I stuck to my decision. My hope for you is that you eventually learn to trust me, not because you couldn't find anything on my phone, but because I've proven myself to be honest, loyal, and trustworthy. I know it's much easier said than done, but my desire for you is to find a lasting security, and I know these checks will never get you there. I mean it when I say I love you. You honestly mean so much to me, and the thought of betraying you but disgusts me. I would never do anything behind your back, and I don't want you to just believe that. My hope is for you to see this and to be true to yourself. I care deeply about you, and I want you to feel secure on this. I love you. Do you understand my perspective a little better now? What do you think about it? Comment on parts you disagree with or need more explanation. It's 1:03 and I really need to sleep. Good night, I hope you're sleeping well. Okay, that's fucking creepy, but also, why did they end their doc with like a video outro? Like saying like, alright guys, thank you for reading this document, be sure to like and comment, like, I don't know. One of the other notable things that happened during this period was that Jane's mother had put a curfew on their texting, limiting them to only texting before 9 PM. Although Sawtooth did break that curfew when Jane was feeling suicidal. Things were interrupted again in April/May 2019, when Jane's mother again took away her phone. The reason for this is unknown, but whatever it was angered Jane's mother to the point that Jane was forbidden from talking to Sawtooth ever again. Sawtooth was also told not to contact Jane, and they respected that rule initially, although that only lasted a month because they got into contact again. 2019 wasn't a particularly good year for Jane personally overall, as a forced separation from Sawtooth caused her to spiral down mentally. Her grades and potential in high school had flopped, with only Sawtooth's presence and compliments that were forwarded to her keeping her afloat, which turned into a new personal obsession with Sawtooth. She still made fan and ship art, and she avoided a chance at college because she thought it would delay her dream of meeting Sawtooth in real life. Sawtooth even told little 16-year-old me, them 21 in college themselves at the time, to pursue love or do whatever my heart desired, and to not let them hold me back. But I was young, dumb, and in love. I wanted to be with them. I wanted to see them IRL ASAP. I thought college would get in the way of all of that, so I didn't listen to them at all, and never got anywhere. I was denied an early college course because of my poor grades. That could have been my chance, but again, I didn't try. I wanted to live the perfect fairy tale life I'd planned. I regret that so immensely nowadays. If I went to college, I'd actually be somewhere by now. Probably not making these posts, and I'd definitely not be living with my mom, sitting on my bed like I am now. I ruined my own life because of Sawtooth. I wasted my own time. Sawtooth will tell you themselves that they ruined my life, and that may be true because if they weren't around, I'd probably be somewhere else by now, a little more happy and unhurt. Sawtooth definitely helped me in the times I needed support, but being there when I was most vulnerable and needy is what caused this unhealthy attachment in the first place. In March 2020, Jane was entering senior year, but that was also around the time COVID had hit and everything was cut short. She and Sawtooth still weren't talking at this time, and again, she said that it was incredibly difficult for her mentally due to the few options she now had in her future, but by now she was fully involved in the fantasy of living out her life with Sawtooth when she turned 18. Eventually that came around in June 2020, and the second she turned 18, they both entered a sexual relationship. Immediately, they both started doing sexual roleplay, as it was a long-distance relationship. However, Jane says that she wasn't ready or comfortable to participate in these roleplays, but did it to keep them happy, craving their attention since she'd mostly been deprived of it. However, it's also worth noting that Jane was never forced or pressured into doing anything sexual. Sexual roleplay was the least of the issues in the relationship. Constant toxicity, Jane being clingy and demanding to Sawtooth, and more, had created issues in the relationship. Sawtooth gave Jane multiple chances to try and change, but each time she'd just relapse, and eventually on December 13th, 2020, they broke up, and Jane's vision of the promised land had turned out to be a mess. The relationship they'd been dreaming of for years only lasted 6 months. Now you'd think that that was the end of everything, but apparently, no. During the same month, Sawtooth offered Jane a deal to become friends with benefits, and in fact, sexual encounters between the two continued all the way up until late 2022, as their friendship became more and more toxic, and eventually the two cut most of their ties with each other. Jane had slowly realised what had happened to her. On December 30th, 2022, she told Sawtooth that she was going to come out with a story against them, and they reacted by begging her not to, and that they'd do anything because the channel meant so much to them. We didn't do that until I was 18, which is the only good thing here, Lamar, but I'm just saying. What the fuck does this mean, though? How did you not know sexting was illegal? It didn't feel illegal. I thought as long as it wasn't explicit. That's stupid and dangerous and irresponsible, I know. I was stupid, dangerous, and irresponsible. I regret it every day. I hurt you, and I'm sorry. Please, I'll do anything. My channel is literally so important to me. How can I prove I'm not a threat? Please, I'll do anything. Please. Even if you're not a physical threat anymore, it's the moral threat, and people should know what you did. What does that mean? How is it a moral threat if it's not a physical threat? I don't give a fuck if you were like 18 or 19, like you were. You were 19. That's not fresh out of being a minor like you're always saying. I'm not attracted to minors. I used to be when I was close to being one, which doesn't make it right to act on, of course. I was absolutely in the wrong. So you're admitting you are or were attracted to minors. Serious question. Everyone used to be, even a bit after not being a minor. It's normal. Usually bad to act upon, always bad if it's a big age gap like ours. But like, someone turning 18 doesn't have to break up with a 17-year-old party, you know? Okay, I see your point, but when you're over 18, you gotta be responsible and careful with how you converse with people. Your excuse isn't a fucking excuse. You're almost 20. Yeah, I wish I learned that before I hurt you. All the time I wish I could go back. I'm not making excuses for myself. There's no excuse. Sounds like you were. I was explaining that I've never been a pedophile. We were outside Romeo and Juliet laws, for your information. I learned that after your mom texted me, and I looked into the legality of it. Sorry to bother you. Lamar, even worse, and no worries. Romeo and Juliet laws are just 4 years, so yeah, it was illegal. Shit, Lamar, we had that additional 3 months. Goddamn. Jane's final message to Sawtooth reads as follows. I looked up to you, Saw. You were the main reason behind anything I did before I became chronically online. You were the only reason I even made my first Instagram account. You made it to the top of all my favorite YouTuber lists, and I loved each and every one of your videos and each piece of music. You were the reason I made my YouTube account and channel. I wanted to be just like you. I wanted to be your friend, and at one point we were, but at what cost? I lost everything I ever worked for, figuratively and literally. I lost my chance to the real future because we had no boundaries. I was the best of the best before I met you, especially in science class, but after I started slacking, my performance showed. You have no idea how many countless times I got my phone taken by teachers and my mom because of you. I sacrificed everything for you in the name of love. I trusted you so much and turned to you when I had no one else, but for what? Just to end up realizing all of what we did was wrong and not to mention illegal. I'm honestly saddened. It's horrifying to have to think that the same little kid who was your #1 fan, the fan who memorized your videos, made their friends watch you and post all about you just to give you new fans, had to grow up and testify against you. I know I shouldn't be apologizing, but I'm sorry. I knew the channel meant a lot to you, it meant a lot to me too. It was there when no one else was, and eventually you yourself were there too. I also want to apologize to my younger self for not protecting them when they needed it most. I thought I was smart enough to know not to get groomed or fraternize. I knew all the rules. Not smart enough, but I'm not going to blame myself. I was a child, you were an adult. A popular YouTuber a lot of minors looked up to. I was one of them. On February 13th, Sawtooth made a 2-part response on his Twitter and community tab. The first part reads as follows. Content warning, fraternizing with a minor, suicidality. You may have seen recent posts by person alleging my abuse against them. I'm deeply ashamed to say it's true. You can find their statement on Instagram or Twitter. Please read it first. We recall small details differently, but the important facts are the same. So if you're going to read just one statement, make sure it's theirs. I'm going to start from the beginning and highlight everything I did wrong. Since starting my channel at 15, I took pride in how I talked to commenters and fans. I saw them as equals, treating them all as potential friends. I didn't understand the inherent imbalance of the fan/creator dynamic, and the power that gave me over others, especially those younger than me. As I got older, that power only got stronger, yet even as an adult, I didn't change my behavior to match. I was reckless and irresponsible, throwing all that power around like it was nothing. The danger I posed would soon lead to the biggest mistake of my life. I met the victim online in March 2017. They'd shared a nice post about me and I left a comment thanking them. A week later I replied to the DM request and we started chatting. There was nothing out of the ordinary for a while, just occasional convos about my videos and theories they had, but that summer, when they were 15 and I was 19, we started getting close. We would talk more often and share hardships with each other. During this time I saw myself as a ray of light in their dark life, but in reality I was creating an emotional overdependence that would alter the course of their life. Unfortunately, it gets much worse. They had always been infatuated with me, and earlier that summer they told me about their crush, to which I turned them down. We went on as usual, but in the late summer of 2017, I started developing feelings back. So when they started pursuing me again, I'm ashamed to say I started returning their affection. We would be flirty in text roleplay, and by November, those roleplays had escalated to the point of passionate kissing. I'd personally set a hard line at anything explicit, as if that made any of it okay. No suggested photos or anything like that were shared, but the roleplays were wildly inappropriate, and leaks beyond okay. Thinking about what I did sickens me, and I regret it also deeply. Before continuing with what happened, I want to compare the excuses I made for my actions at the time versus how I view my actions now. To be clear, this is not in any way to justify what I did. The reasoning I used disgusts me and I have no excuse. I just want to shed light on how someone who saw themselves as a good person could do something so terrible. When I heard about online predators, I imagined people who sought out children and pressured them into sex. I only ever had good intentions and never imagined I could ever hurt them. Even during the worst of it, I still didn't understand the abuse I was committing. I knew minors can't consent to adults, but I'd been the one saying yes. My feelings were real and I truly cared for them. There was no pressure at play, or so I was careless enough to believe. What's so obvious to me now is that if a person is too young to consent to an adult's offer, they're too young to make an offer to the adult. It's the same lack of understanding, no matter who's pursuing who. I had the responsibility to keep strong boundaries and a professional distance from minors and the emotionally vulnerable, yet I did the exact opposite. My very presence and prominence in their life was the warping factor pressuring them. I now understand who the victim was, a broken child, desperate for the positive attention their idol was giving them, willing to offer anything to keep it. That's the offer I accepted, and this will never fail to utterly horrify me. Continuing the story, everything came to a front in December, when their mom found a text. She texted me and threatened to call the police on me if I didn't leave their child alone. This was my wake-up call. I realized my actions were, in fact, illegal, and for very good reason. This is when I started learning about power dynamics and imbalances, and truly understand consent beyond the basics. I realized the position I had over the victim, both as an adult and as their idol, but the damage was done. I never should have fostered that connection, but there it was. I just had to decide what to do with it. Of course, with our emotional attachments, we wanted to stay in each other's lives. On top of that, I was worried for their well-being at the prospect of losing me altogether. Even with my remorse, my arrogance kept me from considering that a person's life might actually be better with me out of it. I still ultimately saw myself as a source of good in their life, and then a source of good in mine. I thought that even if I messed up, I could still turn things around and do it right this time. So I asked their mom if I would ever be allowed to talk to them again. She said she was too angry to talk at the time, but suggested that the possibility might be open in the future, and we left it at that. Over the next few months, the victim and I had traced communications. More accurately, they would message me knowing I wouldn't respond, and I only ever did respond when they were actively suicidal and needed intervention. Come April 2018, I asked their mom for permission to talk once more. She allowed it provided that I kept things respectful and didn't talk to them past 9 PM. I saw this as my second chance. There was no role playing besides occasional hugs, and I shut down anything suggestive. However, I made no attempt to tone down our emotional bond. This was the status quo for over 2 years. Our feelings have remained all throughout, so in 2020 when they turned 18 and I was 22, we started a long distance relationship. I truly believe we had a shot at a healthy romance. I thought we were good at talking through most of our problems and accommodating each other, but we've both recently come to realize that the same pressures were still around. We did everything we could to make it work, but at the end of the day our biggest problem went to our very root. The overdependence I'd fostered at the beginning made it impossible for a healthy relationship to exist. So after dating for half a year, we broke up. We were both heartbroken, wanting more but knowing we couldn't have it. We remained friends, attempting varying levels of closeness. We tried different ways to manage our problem, like setting strict boundaries and keeping enough distance to discourage dependence. Today we still keep in touch a bit, careful not to get too close again. Because of my arrogance, I used up the most formatively important years of their life on a connection that didn't have a chance of being healthy. If this had happened to me at 15, I can only begin to imagine how much worse it would be for it. I realize now that staying close was a continued abuse of my power. Once I realized how serious it was, I should have immediately worked towards dismantling our connection. I should have questioned whether that goal was good or even possible. I'm not sure how I would have gone about dismantling something so big, but even if it took months to do, that's still better than the years of their life that I wasted instead. They're still grappling with the many consequences of what I've done, and there will be for a long time. One of the ways they've decided to deal with this is by making their story public. They have good reasons for doing this, and I support them fully. They've had time to reflect on what happened, and it was getting harder to heal as my influence grew, watching more and more people unknowingly praise the person who hurt them so deeply. Coming forward has been truly scary and emotionally grueling for them, so I ask that you respect their privacy and show them nothing but love and support. It shouldn't be half to said, but since this is the internet, if anyone wants to defend me against them, just don't. You're wrong, I should have been the responsible adult and public figure, full stop. I want absolutely nothing to do with victim blamers or anything like that. The fault is on me for wronging them, not on them for exposing my wrongs. Whatever happens to me is literally just the consequences of my actions. I also recognize that this news will hurt more than just me. I want to make clear that absolutely none of the people I've worked with knew anything about what I'd done. To those creators, I'm so terribly sorry. You're all wonderful people who deserve better, and I hope the memory of our past association doesn't hurt your reputation beyond repair. I'm sorry to everyone else who be hurt by this, to everyone who has to reckon with previously happy memories of me going sour, to anyone who now can't help but associate me with their own pain from abuse. I know this will really sting as a community. You've had to watch it too many times, and I can't describe how ashamed I am to be a part of that ugly history. I'm also sorry for hiding this as long as I have. I knew if that word ever got out, I could never be trusted again. I didn't want that for obvious reasons, but also because I know I'm not a threat. I understand the weight of the responsibilities I have as an adult and public figure, and like any healthy adult, I've long since grown out of that possibility of attachment and attraction in the first place. However, I understand that only those close to me can know that for certain. This community needs to be hyper-vigilant against abuse, and I get that it's better safe than sorry. I don't know what exactly this means for me going forward, but here are some of the steps I'll be taking regardless. I'm leaving YouTube indefinitely. For the foreseeable future, all videos have been removed from public viewing. I'm closing my Discord server and deactivating my YouTube Discord account. I'm shutting down my Patreon. I cannot blanket refund everyone, but upon request I will send back via PayPal to everyone who regrets supporting me in light of what I did. Please send your PayPal and Patreon DMs from the account you used to pledge. If you want a refund for t-shirts, Bandcamp purchases, or Discord turbos, DM me on Twitter or Instagram with your PayPal and any proof of purchase. Once refunds are sorted out, I'm closing all DMs on all accounts. If I ever speak as Sawtooth Waves again, it'll all be in the public eye. I sincerely apologise to all affected by this, but most of all, I humbly apologise to the victim. They deserve so much better, and I feel truly immense regret, guilt, and shame for what I did. I'm so very sorry, and my greatest hope is that they find the healing they deserve. They're the only one who can truly forgive me, and I hope one day they do. So, that was a lot to take in. We got the side of the victim, we got the side of the accused, we got the apologies. Both seem to corroborate the same story, although the victim does maintain that Sawtooth was at least given a heads up on this a month or so before it was published. So there's a possibility this is a kind of prepared statement, but let's talk about this. Is Sawtooth Waves a pedophile? By definition, no. Jane was 15 when Sawtooth was first attracted to her, and pedophilia specifically describes those who have an attraction to prepubescent children, or children below the age of 13. I guess if you want to go for hebephilia or phebophilia or whatever people say now, you can, but in that case, I think a stronger word can be used in place. Grooming. Was Sawtooth Waves a groomer? Well, it depends. When it comes to what Sawtooth really is, there's two arguments here, two possible motives that Sawtooth could have had. On one hand, there's the idea of this good-willed savior complex, one that Sawtooth promotes a lot in their confession. You know, they apologize a lot about what they didn't know, and they talk about the kind of just wanting to save Jane. They said that they only started really talking after Jane started venting about her personal life. They said that they would break the 9 PM curfew to text her if she was feeling suicidal, and Sawtooth described themselves as a ray of light in their dark world. But there is a lot more evidence that shows Sawtooth's motive being grooming Jane into a relationship, and there's overwhelming amounts of this. We didn't even need the confession and the apology, because there are so many, countless examples. Waiting 3 years for Jane to turn 18, sexually interacting with her on the day she turns 18, dating a 15-year-old while being 19 themselves, continuing to be friends with benefits for a while after they broke up, the several personal gifts they would send, which is a common grooming tactic, commissioning them to do ship art of their characters, only putting a statement out now because they got caught despite having knowledge of Jane coming out for over a month. I mean, that really says all it needs to say for me, and I know where I'm standing. Was Sawtooth responsible for ruining Jane's chances of a better life? Yeah, probably. I actually saw a few people on Twitter say that the allegations were overblown, because in one part Jane blames Sawtooth for taking up her time from school and ruining her potential. I understand why some would say this, because it's her infatuation with them, how is Sawtooth meant to control that? However, it's worth pointing out that Sawtooth did actively feed this infatuation with messages and compliments that got forwarded to her, and even according to Sawtooth, they were talking pretty regularly, despite that colliding with Jane's statement, which talks more about just regular forwarded compliments. Either way, even if Sawtooth wasn't really aware of how obsessed she was with them, which is unlikely, that's still really irresponsible, and yeah. And plus, they're the adult dating a teenager, of course they're responsible. So, yeah, I'd say they were at fault, and I think that statement overall is a testament to how impactful relations like this can be on someone of that age. This is exactly why 13, 14, 15, 16-year-olds can't really consent to a relationship 5 years greater than them, because they're still deep in their formative years, and if they spend the rest of them neglecting education and chasing after an idol they want, it's gonna hurt when their idol just finds them too clingy. In conclusion, can Sawtooth return? I don't think so. Listen, Sawtooth's apology has a lot of discussion about Sawtooth talking whether they didn't know this or they didn't know that, but Over 4 years, if you cannot realize dating someone 5 years younger than you, someone who is barely in high school, is a bad thing. I mean, I appreciate Sawtooth's apology, but don't let them butter you up too much. Even reading for the apology, I started to feel like some sort of empathy, but like this person has dated someone 5 years younger than them, they've completely ruined their life, and it is... yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy, and I don't think Sawtooth should be really allowed on this platform, unless there is somehow a miracle way that, like, they've changed. If you're a viewer of this channel, you kind of know how this goes. Every new video is like another YouTuber pedophile revelation, and whilst this case wasn't as bad as others I've covered, I think there's some real issues here. I saw some people praising Sawtooth for not getting nudes from the girl when she was younger, which is crazy because I don't think people should be applauded for doing the bare minimum. I think the bar has been set so low by so many other cases that, like, someone not asking nudes from an underage girl is somehow an accomplishment, despite the fact, like, Sawtooth was dating them. And yeah, I don't know, there's some real issues here. How they didn't realize this was wrong at any point really concerns me. But what struck me most about this situation is that loads of people have just come out in sheer disappointment. Sawtooth was undeniably a respected figure in the MLP community, and someone who thousands of kids looked up to. But this entire situation shows how any one of them could have been Jane. The cycle of casting your idols away just continues. It sucks, but it's necessary, and the right thing to do. Until next time, stay toasty.